Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Even if under anarcho-capitalism the top men kept taking more than their fair share of women, and even if the bottom 80% of men kept neglecting to do anything about it, I think it would still be much easier for a bottom 80% guy to get a wife in such a society compared to how it is today, because the real men could just find a husband who cheated on his wife and then exsanguinate that cheating husband, and then offer to marry the widow. And because in a caveman sense this is a natural thing, even a sexually arousing thing to the woman, this means that because of financial necessity, like her financial necessity to be able to take care of herself and or any kids she has at that point, she'll be it'll be a situation for her where she needs someone to take care of her at that point, right? And then also her instincts are telling her this guy is strong and masculine, and he got rid of my husband, so he's pretty attractive or whatever, like at the very least he would be the one offering to, marry her, and so she would probably be interested, right? But even if she doesn't, well, he still will have lowered the number of men in society, thereby decreasing gynocentrism. Because, the more men there are compared to women, the more there will be gynocentrism because of a shortage of women. Or the more men are taking more than their fair share of women, the more there is not enough women, and therefore there's gynocentrism. Whether you have let's say 7 men in society for every 3 women, because of let's say we start genetically engineering, or there's a disease that wipes out mostly just women, right? Whatever. If there were 7 men in society for every 3 women, there would be massive gynocentrism, even if it were a monogamous society, right? But similarly, there is massive gynocentrism today because we have the top men taking way more than their fair share of women. So you got, most women going to the top, 20, 30, 40% of guys, Let's say the top 20 or 30%, right? So they're getting way more than their fair share, even if they're just being serially monogamous, this uses up, twice as many women as monogamy does. So it turns 50% of men into incels. You see, so when these men are promiscuous, the problem's even worse. Or if they're, having threesomes, or they're married and they're also sleeping with women on the side with their wife's permission, that's even worse. Because if a married guy has, repeated sex with, young attractive women for 40 years, that's the equivalent of having 2 other wives for his whole life. He's essentially a trigamist in terms of how many women he's using up. You see, so whether you have more men in society or you just have men using up more than their fair share of women, it amounts to the same thing. There not being enough women and massive gynocentrism, right? So this is how it is. So, like I said, if tons of lower class guys exsanguinate cheating husbands, it will greatly lower the number of men while not lowering the number of women. And it will only be getting rid of the bad men, not any of the good men. It'll only be getting rid of the cheating men. So then not only are you getting rid of bad men in society and lowering the number of men in society, thus making it so that there's less gynocentrism, assuming you have a monogamous society, because, it doesn't really decrease gynocentrism if you free up women just so that the top men can have, 4 women instead of 3 women each. You know what I mean? It doesn't decrease gynocentrism at all. But if you have a monogamous society, then yeah, lowering the number of men in society would decrease gynocentrism. Because even under monogamy, the 1 out of 10 women are unfuckable, and a lot of the 2 and 3 out of 10 women are considered by most men to be unfuckable as well. So, it's still a situation where there's, not enough women for men who would like a woman. You see, so you still have gynocentrism under patriarchy, under monogamy, but not nearly as much gynocentrism. So this is how it is. So again, even if you have monogamy, you will still have gynocentrism, but you can lower that gynocentrism. But again, you don't have anywhere near as much. But what little gynocentrism you do have under patriarchy, under monogamy, you can lower that even more and eventually get rid of it if there's enough cheating men who you're exsanguinating. So this is a good thing, because not only are you getting rid of bad men and lowering gynocentrism, but you are also getting those bad genes out of the populace, so that those guys won't have sons, or won't have as many sons, or won't have as many daughters who will have sons. So then those cheating genes will become less and less prevalent in society if we regularly do this, regularly let under AnCap, we regularly, there's no laws, so the incels are regularly taking out, cheating men. So then it forces men to be faithful to their wives, even though those men are in absolute control over their families. See, men and women in the past, there was way less cheating in the 50s and earlier by women. but men cheated way more than women did. Men cheated a lot less than they do today, but they did cheat a lot more than women did. Now, women cheat even more than men do, right? But, like, so when you have men in control, which you need to do to have a sane society, it unfortunately makes it so that men are likely to abuse that power by cheating on their wives. But if you have no laws, then the incels can exsanguinate such guys. And then men will be incentivized to not cheat on their women, right? So that's good for women, and it's also good for the gene pool, because like I said, it would get the cheating genes out of the gene pool. And it would allow those incels to get wives after they get rid of the cheating men. He'll offer to marry her, and a lot of times she'd probably say yes, right? And let's see here. But even if the wife, the widow, doesn't want to marry the guy who took out her husband for cheating on her, she might want to marry another guy, right? Maybe another incel, maybe another regular guy, and then thus that would free up another woman for another incel. And then, like, if this girl wants to marry some other guy, some incel who killed some other guy who cheated on his wife, and that second wife who is widowed by that second incel wants to marry the first guy who widowed the first woman, so it's like swapping, you know what I mean? Like, you can take out a guy and then ask to marry his widow, but maybe she turns you down. But maybe some other widow, same thing happened to her, and she does want to marry you. And maybe that first widow doesn't want to marry you, but she'd like to marry that other guy who widowed that other woman. So you're still freeing up women for yourself if a lot of guys are doing this, you see. So it gets bad genes out of the gene pool. It allows a lot of incels to get women. It incentivizes men to not cheat on their wives, which, holds patriarchy in check so that men don't abuse the power that they have under AnCap, etc. It's a really, really good thing, you see, and all this is only possible under AnCap where there's no laws, right? So by exsanguinating cheating men on a large scale, men will not only reduce the number of psychopathic, partially psychopathic, and sex-crazed genes in the gene pool, that is, men who can't help but cheat, but it will also make it easier to find a wife because there being more widows of marriageable age out there in society. And if the women whose husbands cheat on them, hide his cheating, if those, some women are getting cheated on by their husband, but she's hiding the fact that he's cheating so that he doesn't get exsanguinated by some guy out there who's looking for a wife and can't find one, then that will mean that cheating will not be publicly visible, and hence cheating will no longer be normalized, and thus it will be condemned, and as a result, cheating will become far more rare again, like it was 60 years ago. And this will make society stronger due to society being more moral, and this increased morality and strength will increase masculinity in society, and will make it more likely that men will be courageous enough to force moral standards on everyone, even the elites, or at least form communities with high moral standards that keep elite men, promiscuous men, out, so that the promiscuous men in society can't destroy those mini communities by stealing and ruining the women, whether those communities are small, such as 100 people, or whether they're large, such as 1,000,000 people. And also, another tiny little ancillary benefit of being free to exsanguinate cheating men is that, like, rich guys like to work, right? They don't want to stay at home with their wives all day long. They like to work and make money, right? So the wife wants to stay home, though, right? So the wife's at home. So how does he keep some guy from, stealing her away or going into his house and then holding his wife captive and then wait until he comes home and then blowing him away? How do you prevent that, right? Well, the only way would be if he hired a security force to guard his house every day, So then you're just creating more jobs, right? You're siphoning money from the rich people, who are they're so rich anyway, it doesn't even matter if you siphon a little bit of money by forcing them to employ several bodyguards for their mansion. And then you're employing other men, right? Other men are getting employed as bodyguards, and that's a good thing, right? Because, the rich men are just going to hoard their wealth if you let them, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that's another benefit of an AnCap society. I don't consider this like a main benefit of an AnCap society, but it is another, ancillary benefit that, incels taking out cheating men would make society better, both genetically and in terms of male enfranchisement and lowering gynocentrism as well. And this is a miscellaneous video cobbled together from a few things I wrote down a long time ago, so since it's so short, I'll just add another little thing that I found amongst some writings that I had already discussed in previous videos, so I'm not going to repeat those other points on those papers that I found this point in, but there was one point among those several points which I had not mentioned before, And that point is that if MGTOW men don't advocate for the mass murder of the bottom 30% of men, then MGTOW men are either idiots or absolute psychopaths, because turning a man into an incel is a fate worse than death if that state of being an incel is never going to change. I'm not going to say that being an incel for like 10 years is a fate worse than death, such as if, all guys got married at 26 and many guys thus were not able to get laid until they got married at 26. But I will say that being an incel for one's whole life would be a fate worse than death. And thus I think it would be far more humane to kill the incels rather than to turn them into incels and make them live their lives like that. Just like it would be more humane to use a guillotine on someone than it would be to starve them to death or dehydrate them to death, right? So either MGTOW men, and obviously I'm only referring to the MGTOW men who are not MGTOW monks, MGTOW men are either absolute idiots for not realizing that their promiscuity is causing the incel problem and the gynocentrism that results from the incel problem, which makes the incel problem even worse, or MGTOW men are absolute psychopaths who don't give a shit that they're harming bottom 30% men more than if they exsanguinated them. So if MGTOW men had any balls and any brains and any intellectual consistency at all and any compassion, they would be advocating for the exsanguination of 30% of American men, the American men who are incels. The fact that MGTOW men are not advocating for the mass exsanguination of all incels proves that MGTOW men who are not MGTOW monks are either psychopaths or are absolute idiots. And actually, I think it's probably that most MGTOWs who are not MGTOW monks are both. They're both deeply stupid and deeply psychopathic. That is totally callous to the suffering of other people, not just incels, but, women and people in the Middle East are being genocidally wiped out by our government, etc., etc. I mean, that's just the beginning. They don't even give a shit about the human race. I mean, a lot of them are like, yeah, let the world burn. I don't give a shit, right? Like, this is complete psychopathy. I mean, what do you even say about it? Not to mention totally cowardly. And let me also say that it's no coincidence that at the very same time men are more cowardly than they ever have been before, that is today, and in the face of omnicidal danger, no less, it's also the same time in history that men are less compassionate and less loving than ever before. Men today are incredibly callous and psychopathic, as evidenced by MGTOW's refusal to look at the whole picture when it comes to women. MGTOW's refusal to acknowledge that women of the past were unimaginably better than women of today. Right? And that women do have a good side as well, and MGTOW's psychopathic attitude toward pumping and dumping, and MGTOW's psychopathic attitude toward other men, such as incels and even other MGTOW men, and men are incredibly cowardly and lacking in nobility, as evidenced by MGTOW men's refusal to even advocate that we overthrow the government. It's no coincidence that men are now both more cowardly and more callous at the same time in history. And it's like MGTOW men are probably the bravest among men in America. I mean, I don't see the alt-right guys getting violent or anything. So I can't really call them brave. And who else is braver than, alt-right guys and MGTOW guys? Nobody. And yet both of those groups are totally cowardly, So they're incredibly cowardly, and MGTOWs at least are incredibly callous as well. Love and courage go together. If you aren't able to love, not necessarily romantically, but just love in general, like love your kids, love your friends, love your siblings, love other people, love your parents, etc., right? Especially love, strangers or even your enemies. Like Jesus was absolutely right. It takes more courage to love a stranger than it does to love your friends. Everybody loves their friends. It takes more courage and mental and emotional capacity and bravery and wisdom to love strangers. And it takes even more wisdom and courage and stuff like that than to love your enemies than it does to love strangers. Jesus was absolutely right about that. But like I was saying, love and courage go together. If you're not able to love, you aren't able to be brave. And that is why MGTOW men are so cowardly. So cowardly that they won't even open their mouth and just advocate for overthrow of the government. They're so cowardly because they have no love in their hearts. Whether they ever did in the first place is irrelevant. The main point is that they have no love in their hearts now. And sure, there are exceptions, but I'm just speaking about a general rule, a general truth about what I see in MGTOW. So if this doesn't apply to you, if you're not a psychopath, if you're not a coward, if you do want to overthrow the government and you are opening your mouth about it, and you are brave and you are capable of love, then don't be offended. But if this does apply to you, then go ahead and be offended. Maybe it'll make you think twice about being so egotistical and short-sighted and selfish and callous and cowardly. Do your fucking part. Make a 5-minute video once a week, even if it's far shittier than my videos. And I'm not saying my videos are so great. Quality is not what is of primary importance. The important thing is that you're making an effort on a regular basis, because if you don't do your part, then no one else will. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Be on the right side of history. Start making regular videos, even if it's only a 5-minute unscripted rant once a week. Another thing I wanted to mention in this video is that a while ago I saw the movie Gladiator again, and it listed the four primary virtues. It listed them as wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. I think it's interesting that compassion is not one of these virtues. Confucius listed the three major virtues as wisdom, compassion, and courage. And I think Confucius's list is a better list. That's pretty much my list as well, Confucius's list. Although I think the Western list is a pretty decent one as well. Wisdom is very important. It's also called prudence. Fortitude includes courage, strength, forbearance, and endurance. Temperance includes restraint, abstention, self-control, chastity, sobriety, and that kind of thing, which is actually really important because, as someone else once said, it's better to get rid of a vice than it is to cultivate a virtue. And in Buddhism, it's more important to follow the precepts first than it is to start doing good deeds or meditating. Vices are like holes in a bucket. You need to plug the holes by following the precepts before you can make any progress in doing good deeds or in practicing meditation. Just like, you can't carry any water in a bucket if it has holes, right? It'll just leak right out, right? So follow the precepts to keep your, wisdom and compassion and stuff from leaking out. Because like you can accrue wisdom and compassion and things like this by meditating, but it'll just leak right out again really quickly if you don't follow the precepts. And then you'll be basically wasting your time by meditating. And justice is fairness and righteousness. Although it seems to me that this virtue, justice, overlaps a lot with temperance. So I guess this list of four, this Western list of virtues, is kind of similar to Confucius's list, because there's wisdom, and there's also temperance and justice, kind of standing in for compassion, and then there's forbearance for courage. And virtues relate as well. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And another thing I want to say is that virtues relate to each other, and there's overlap and stuff. And they even when there's not overlap, they are related, right? Like how you need courage to be righteous. Like maybe you know the right thing to do, but if you don't have any courage, you won't be able to do it, right? And it takes courage to not lie. It takes courage to be compassionate. It takes compassion to be fair. It takes wisdom to be fair, etc., etc. So these virtues are actually quite related as well. And finally, I wanted to mention a few commercials with propaganda. I saw Eternity for Men commercial that had Jake Gyllenhaal in it, and the girl in it was mulatto or maybe three-quarters black. And, Jake Gyllenhaal is the boy from, well, now he's older, but, he was a boy when he did Donnie Darko, and he's totally white. So, a white guy with a black girl, this definite miscegenation propaganda. And you know how these cologne commercials are. They're always the exact same thing. It's like a teaser for a movie or something almost. It always features like a guy and girl that are interested in each other or portrayed as being together already. Like, he's white and she's black or mostly black or at least half black. So it's definite miscegenation propaganda. Another propaganda commercial I saw was a commercial promoting homosexuality by showing two women getting married. It was a commercial for a website of some kind. Another propaganda commercial I saw was for the Spanish version of the Foundation for a Better Life, called Fundación para la Vida Mejor. And in the commercial, it was promoting friendship. And it showed a young white boy, maybe, I don't know, 8 years old or something, going out of his way to try to befriend a young Asian boy. This is definite multiculturalism propaganda. And it's not an accident, because I saw another Fundación para la Vida Mejor commercial promoting miscegenation, so I know that foundation promotes miscegenation. And yet more propaganda that I saw in yet another commercial was a V necklace. It was, so it wasn't a commercial, right? It was in a movie. It was in that movie Office Christmas Party, which I didn't watch, but I was flipping and I saw a few minutes of it, and I noticed a necklace. There are so many V necklaces in different TV shows and movies and stuff. It's crazy. It is definitely symbolism. I also saw some earrings in a movie or TV show. I think it was, I can't remember what it was actually, but it was one earring thing, but it was like two symbols together. It was like a circle on top of an upside-down triangle. This is pretty obvious Illuminati symbolism, if you ask me. The circle represents the eye, and the triangle is the triangle, only it's upside down. A lot of times you'll see a triangle with a circle in it instead of a vesica Pisces. And that's the same thing. It's the eye and the triangle symbolism. I also saw another earring that was Illuminati symbolism, I'm pretty sure. I think it was in Legacies, but I can't remember for sure. I just remember the earring. And it was a little gold earring with a circle not filled in. It was just like, the outline of a circle. And then it had a little line through it, a little vertical line going through the middle of the bottom of the circle, the gold circle, right? So this is very similar to that symbol that I've mentioned many, many times before. That's a circle with a vertical line through it, but it usually cuts through both sides of the circle, right? Or it just fills in the inside, but from one end to the other vertically. But this one, it just goes through the bottom of the circle and it doesn't actually touch the top part of the circle. So it's a little different, although I think it's just disguising the symbol. I think it's meant to be that a depiction of that same symbol. They're just making it not so obvious that it's the same symbol. This has been Redshift. I hope someone got something out of this. Peace trucks for promiscuous men because they are literally the source of gynocentrism.